Mila discovers she is not only the Queen Luna of the wolf pack, but also possesses the power to change the fate of the werewolves. How will she use her newfound abilities to prevent the impending war? How will her relationship with Roman evolve, and is she really willing to sacrifice herself for the future of the pack? Explore the secrets of the wolf moon. Subscribe to join the adventure. Chapter 26. I was led deeper into the cave until we were in a hollowed-out pocket of a room, which shimmered overwhelmingly, with jewels along the wall and ceiling of the cave. In the center was a pool of water, black as the night sky, but reflective of stars just as the crone's eye within the temple had been. Cynthia stepped to this smaller body of water, and turned to face me patiently. I couldn't stop looking at Cynthia, as though she might disappear at any moment. Flashes of the flames that enveloped the temple kept crossing my mind. I was relieved and happy that she had survived, but there was no sign or hint of any damage from the fire on any of her skin that I saw. There had been so many wolves nearby. And yet she had escaped. Had there been more than one secret passageway out? Kate leaned her lance against the wall before walking towards Cynthia to stand beside her. She looked from Cynthia to me with her own type of patience. I stood before them, filled with uncertainty. I felt out of place suddenly. "You must feel confused right now," Cynthia said to me wisely, clasping her hands together, as she took me in empathetically. "I have a lot of questions." I was proud of myself for containing the questions that were spilling throughout my thoughts wildly. "I want to tell her." "Can I tell her?" Kate looked to Cynthia eagerly. "Patience," Cynthia scolded her. Kate crossed her arms with a frown. "Tell me what?" I asked hesitantly. "First, you must give me your word." Cynthia's tone became so serious that I was unable to take my eyes from her sable gaze. My heart was thudding uncomfortably in my chest. Why was I afraid? "You must promise you will stay and hear everything until the very end, no matter how absurd things may seem or if it angers you." "No running," Kate agreed with a nod. I paused. Where would I run to, anyway? A war was about to start, if it hadn't already. Whether I ran to the wolves or to the humans, there was no refuge for me. "I won't run," I said determinedly, "I swear." "Then, I suggest we begin with introductions," Cynthia began, closing her eyes briefly before opening them again. A glow was beginning to rise along her skin. It was like her skin was turning into shining silver, warm and dangerous at the same time. My eyes widened at the sight. "Is this something Oracle Wolves can do?" I asked nervously. "I am no Oracle Wolf," Cynthia responded as she stood before me. "I am no wolf, either. I have many names and many forms: Cynthia, Phoebe, Selene, Luna." I stared at her blankly. "The mother," she concluded, exuding that overwhelming and otherworldly energy I had felt so many times before. I only blinked in response. Had I heard her correctly? Kate took a step forward to draw my attention from Cynthia abruptly. I turned to her. A shadow had begun to rise over her own form, black as night despite the glow of the jewels within the room. It looked positively terrifying. "I am no warrior wolf," Kate echoed Cynthia's sentiments. "And I am no wolf. I have many names and many forms. You have called me Kate. Others call me Hecate, Ereshkigal, the crone." My heart was racing at this point as I took in their ethereal figures. My mind couldn't wrap around the idea of what they were telling me. I was speechless. "Do you understand, Mila?" Cynthia asked me gently. I looked from Kate to her and back again. The goddesses had never been actual entities in my own image of the world. They were formless ideas and invisible deities that haunted the sky to watch those below. The thought that they had been here, close to me, this entire time. It was hard to understand. I turned to Cynthia hesitantly. "So you escaped the fire?" My words faltered from my lips before I could finish. She's a goddess. Fire won't hurt us, Kate said with a laugh of amusement. I looked to Kate with wide eyes. And you could refuse Roman's commands. Everyone thinks you're mute. My mind was spinning. I can't be commanded by anyone, much less a pup. And I don't speak to those who I haven't deemed in my favor, Kate answered me, at first a bit prideful, but then her voice softened at my obviously bewildered reaction. My oracles, of course. I apologize for deceiving you. I also do not speak to those I do not favor, but the oracles are sometimes an exception, Cynthia agreed, nodding slowly. This is why I remained hidden in the temple. I do apologize for deceiving you, Mila. They spoke to me carefully, as though there were much more beyond what they'd already told me, but they didn't want to rush to divulge information all at once. I stared at them in shock, trying again and again to find logic in how this could even be possible. They didn't press further. Instead, they stood silent, waiting for me to gain control of my own thoughts. After the initial shock, a question echoed in my mind. It was one that had whispered behind every breath since I'd been selected for the wolf moon. And now that two of the moon goddesses stood before me, I could ask them. Why? I asked abruptly before more questions spilled from me rapidly. Why me? Why was I given the same ability Roman has? Why was I chosen to be Roman's mate? Why am I the one who has to stop him? Cynthia and Kate didn't respond immediately. They didn't even look at each other to seek the proper answer. I was expecting something like I had been picked at random, some wild human who was fated to catch the eye of the King Alpha. Well, Kate looked to Cynthia briefly as though checking if she wanted to answer before looking back to me. Why can you turn your hands into claws? I hesitated, glancing at my hands as if they had answers. Because I'm a wolf. I answered uncertainly. Are you? Kate replied with her own question, lifting her hand to her chin thoughtfully. My lance is truthfully laced with silver, so why can you touch it without it hurting you? My brows furrowed in further confusion. I paused, looking at my hands again. When I'd traced my finger along the silver of the blade Roman gave me, it was only cold metal to the touch. The words I had thought as I'd touched it echoed in my mind. I'm no wolf. I'm no wolf, Kate replied immediately. I'm no wolf, Cynthia said as well, shaking her head firmly. I stared at them openly, utterly confused. How did this explain anything? Kate said abruptly, lifting her right hand palm forward towards me. Cynthia followed her lead, lifting her own hand up. Instead of holding her hand palm forward, she held it vertically before her, with the meat of the side of her hand from pinky to wrist showing. Just under her pinky was a mark, ever so small, of a solid circle with a hallowed center. I looked back to Kate's hand to see her own mark under her pinky, a crescent the opposite direction of the one on my hand. I looked from both of theirs to my hand slowly, looking at that birthmark that I'd had my entire life. It was identical to Kate's, but when I looked again to confirm, I knew. It was just reversed. It was reversed. I shook my head. You can't be saying what I think you're saying, I said to them stubbornly, closing my hand into a fist. It depends what you think we are saying, Kate teased, crossing her arms once more before watching me curiously. That I'm like the both of you, I struggled to get the words out. You have many names, Cynthia began, but I shook my head and interrupted her. I have only one. Mila. Milena, I corrected her quickly, a panic beginning to rise within me. This was all madness. They were mad. Diana, Cynthia continued despite my interruption, Agritora. Just Mila. Sometimes Tala. Sometimes Queen Luna, but just Mila, I argued almost desperately. Artemis, the maiden, Cynthia finished softly. That is why. I shook my head firmly yet again. I'm not. I'm not the maiden. Why not? Kate interjected easily, you have her ability, don't you? I looked to her at a loss, my limbs beginning to tremble at the insane idea they had presented before me. She must have, I don't know, given it to me like she did Roman, I said, refusing to budge from the comfort of my prior world. You were the one who gave it to that boy, Kate responded just as stubbornly. You're asking the wrong question. You're asking why you were chosen. You weren't. You chose him, don't you understand? A hint of irritation came across Kate's features, as she rose her hand to her forehead in slight frustration. You've been going on and on about this beast for centuries. Don't curse him. No, I won't take away his blessing. He can change. My word, Kate turned to look at Cynthia with a groan, like I told you, when she asked me to take away his punishment, it was like she was back all over again. Cynthia nodded mutely. Lovesick, she agreed, since the beginning. I had paled entirely. They were adamant on this truth. I couldn't help but to look at myself, as though my own body had betrayed me. Was it all true? I couldn't fathom it. But was it true? An unknown pain was rising within me. This idea that I was who they said I was. It was painful. I couldn't say it. The pain was sharpening. I shook my head. Go on, my sister, Cynthia coaxed me gently. I shook my head again. You're telling me the truth, I choked, the pain like fire in my throat. I covered my eyes with my hands suddenly, beginning to struggle to breathe. Then, I cursed them. The thought was like knives in my lungs, slicing at me dangerously. The maiden's blessing. If I was the maiden, as they said, which I couldn't even imagine. I recalled Logan's words. She was pregnant with a pup nearly 2 decades ago, when the maiden took away her blessing. She was one of many who lost their child in their own bellies. I could hear Roman's words echoing behind this. Birth, that's her blessing. The maiden took away our ability to exist. I felt hands wrap around my wrist, pulling my own from my eyes gently. Tears were flooding my sight, but I could see Cynthia's blurry form before me. My mind was overwhelmed. I recalled my hand on Diana's own stomach, as she prayed for fertility, that surge of power that flowed through me to her. Had it truly been me all along? You had to make a sacrifice, Cynthia said to me carefully, the birth of werewolves are a blessing only you manage. When you became mortal, you weren't aware of yourself any longer. The infertility was an unfortunate side effect, though temporarily, Mila. Temporary, as long as you want it to be, this I promise you. I don't understand, I responded in frustration, looking to Kate. You're here, like me. You're here as wolves or humans or whatever, but you remember everything. I don't remember any of this. It doesn't make sense. It's what you asked for, Kate answered firmly. Look. She gestured from her to Cynthia and back again. We were done. The King Alpha was an insult to us. Constantly. He took your blessing, one you never gave to anyone else before, and used it to take over the entire werewolf species. Instead of vying for peace, as we demanded through the oracles, he systematically began to oppress and destroy the humans and any strength they had. Hecate, Cynthia called her name in warning. I'm telling her what she needs to know, Kate answered Cynthia with a hint of irritation before turning back to me. Celine decided to punish him by not giving him a mate. This didn't deter him at all. In fact, he got worse. So I decided, fine, he won't get peace. You would think a couple extra years would give a person time to grow and reflect upon their mistakes. He began to plan humankind extinction instead. And you? Suddenly, Kate looked at me with a frown, not continuing. You refused to punish him, Cynthia continued for her in a much less blunt tone. We asked you to take away his ability, at the least. You refused. You see, you were quite fond of him. And even through his insults, you only saw his pain. Instead of punishment, you asked us to release him. Incessantly, Kate reminded me firmly. I thought maybe we could contain him for a while, give him a bit of solitary confinement for him to come to his senses. This didn't work. He banished all my oracles in response, cutting off the connection between us and the wolves. Whatever we did, it wasn't working. He was moving forward with his plan to wipe out the humans. We couldn't allow this. So we decided. Cynthia hesitated now, as though she wasn't sure she wanted to tell me what they decided. We decided to restart the cycle, Kate said for her, echoing a sentiment I recalled Cynthia mentioning the last night I had saw her. Wipe out the wolves and start over from scratch. The King Alpha had already poisoned so many minds, it wasn't worth the headache. You weren't a fan of this idea, even when I said the King Alpha would be taken as well. I mean, we were offering him peace essentially, right? There was a moment of pause as Kate gave me time to take her words in. Well, you asked for a last chance, she continued simply. You asked to become mortal, a human with no memories of your past, so that you could grow to love him all over again and prove that the man you cared for was still there behind all the anger. I came to assist you and Hecate, too. I would help guide you. She would stay close to you. But this is your path, the one you chose and have been walking. That is why nothing you do will be considered a failure to us. You can stop this, if that's what you want to do, Cynthia spoke me to kindly, reaching to grasp my hands. I was too stunned to pull away. We could just stop here, I mean, Kate suggested with a shrug before smiling deviously. As I said, tonight seems like a great night for a massacre, don't you think? Kate was suddenly much more terrifying than she had ever been before as the shadow of death. This was the crone. She had no qualms with taking the souls of the werewolves here tonight. No, I rejected her offer, my voice firm despite my internal feeling of being so much smaller than the two creatures before me. No? If what you say is true, you. No, we caused this. We interfered. And we have to try to correct it. I can't just give up on them. And I can't just give up on. I thought of Roman, an image of a man that seemed to shine differently in my mind suddenly. Had my own fondness, before I even knew it existed, contributed to this? I couldn't even imagine it. Kate made a noise of satisfaction in her throat. Memories or not, Artemis in the flesh. Cynthia looked entirely pleased and relieved. Then tonight will be the final night in which you can correct what we've damaged, Cynthia said to me determinedly. You are the only one besides us who can kill Roman Stone. You have been able to since your rebirth. If you would have struck him with that arrow, or stabbed him with that blade, he would not have survived. I was cold at her words, shocked. I recalled aiming to kill him and hesitating without knowing why. Had it been a phantom feeling or memory? An inherent knowledge that he would die and that it was something I didn't wish for. You want me to kill him? I asked her with difficulty. I am only telling you so you are aware the paths you can take. If you choose, you can kill him and give him the peace he has wanted for centuries. You can fight his packs, but you are mortal, unlike the way we are. You were born as a human and you can die as one. If this happens, you will return to us as Artemis, Cynthia continued to inform me, careful not to sound too harsh. If you fail to stop him at all, no matter if you live or die, we'll restart the cycle, Kate added firmly, but then seemed to relax further before sighing. It's such a relief to finally get this out here. It's been amusing watching you stumble around, but it's been. A flash of anger crossed her features at a thought or distant memory. Disrespectful. Now, Hecate, they weren't aware of who she truly was, Cynthia scolded Kate lightly. Disrespectful. Kate spelled the word out, stubbornly offended. I shook my head lightly. I still can't wrap my head around it, I said honestly. Well, we don't have all night, so just take it at face value and learn to accept it later, Kate teased humorously before linking her fingers together and lifting her hands up to begin stretching. I watched her mess around for a moment before speaking. What are you doing? Getting ready to get you to shift, of course, Kate responded with a groan as she reached for her toes. Cynthia only closed her eyes as though Kate was beginning to annoy her already. They were so different from one another. I can't, I mumbled uncertainly. I've tried to shift about 100 times. I can only do a half shift. That's because you're not a wolf, Kate said lightly, doing a couple of jumping jacks before jogging in place almost comically. You're trying to shift like a werewolf and you're not one. It's not going to work. I don't understand, I repeated my currently favorite phrase. The first problem is that you have many forms, whereas a werewolf only has two. Their focus is only on shifting from one form, a human, to another, a wolf. And then of course reverse. They don't have to think beyond just allowing the power of transformation wash over them and resulting into whatever they may be, Kate continued to explain firmly. She lifted a finger to point to herself, but for us, we don't have just one option. For example, Kate seemed to suddenly twist before me, but her movement was like liquid. Her form distorted and then within a single breath, she was airborne a dark raven, which landed on Cynthia's shoulder proudly. It was official. I had lost my mind. I was obviously in some mad mental state, probably still in the prison cell Roman had left me in. I blinked speechlessly. Did you notice the difference in how Hecate transformed versus the wolves? Cynthia drew my attention to her. I hesitated, looking back to the dark raven before thinking back to the actual transformation. I'd seen several werewolves shift at this point. It seemed like an actual beast exploding from within them, forming over their own skin, and twisting them into another creature altogether. I had thought I'd felt the beginnings of that beast, but I remembered how silent it had become among the humans. As for Kate, when she had changed, it was like breathing. In just another breath, she leapt from Cynthia's shoulder, and as though simply stretching, she was suddenly the same Kate I thought I'd known all along. See? She asked, lifting her arms as though pleased. I was dumbfounded. I still had doubts about my own ability to shift as easily as she had, no matter what the form would be. Before I could answer Kate, Cynthia spoke. The second problem you face is that you were reborn. As part of this contract, you won't gain your memories back until you have faced a mortal death. This makes you weaker than if you had simply taken human form. So learning to use your abilities will take more work, and I doubt you'll ever be able to meet your true potential as Mila, no longer how long you live in this life. Cynthia spoke with that serious wisdom I was familiar with. I still couldn't wrap my head around this second identity. I couldn't imagine myself beyond myself. But it was undeniable at this point that they were the actual moon goddesses. This was as clear as the raven-shaped Kate had just turned into. I'd never even heard of another being turning into something beyond a wolf. I sighed and tried to think about how I'd been attempting to shift previously. So, this whole time, I've been telling the wolf within me to form. I even tried to use my ability to command it to shift within me. This isn't what I'm supposed to do. There is no actual wolf within you. You are already a wolf if you want to be. It's not a matter of trying to tell it to take over. You just realize you are the form you want to take, that it's not something you must become because you already have become it. And then you just take a breath and shift, Kate explained as though her teachings made any sense. I frowned further. If there is no beast, what is it I've been feeling? And what about being Roman's mate? How can this be, if I'm not a werewolf? Kate shrugged. That's Celine's work, not mine or yours. It's a mark I placed on your spirit, Cynthia responded carefully. When you were made mortal, I attached the connection to your wolf form, so that you could feel something that's similar to what the werewolves feel. It allowed you to make an attachment to King Alpha's spirit, something I must confess may transcend with you after you've left this mortal form. In this way, he may always be a mark on your soul even after he's gone. I flushed at her words at how solid and final they were. No matter what outcome, we would have a part of each other marking that unknown entity that made us who we were. It was like an unseen scar. And yet, a part of me didn't mind such a thought. I drew my attention back to the task at hand. So, don't command. Just be. I inquired hesitantly. Kate nodded before gesturing her hand towards me. Go on. Do it. I dare you. She was always so challenging. I couldn't help but smile just slightly at her words. It didn't seem like her idea on how to shift would be any help to me at all, but I would humor her. I closed my eyes and looked within. I could feel that beast just under my skin, stretched out comfortably and yet quiet. It only ever seemed to act up around Roman, probably because he was my mate and the beast knew this. But if I went by Kate's wisdom, there was no actual beast within me, was there? It was just me. I inspected it more carefully than I ever had before. Was this beast not something different from me entirely? It didn't feel normal, but I suppose I wasn't normal. Was there even a creature under my skin at all? No, I thought to it, you're just me, aren't you? There seemed to be a deafening silence in response. Whatever beast had been there was suddenly gone, but not gone. I took a breath. I am the beast. I took another breath. A feeling of cold washed over me and I felt as though gravity suddenly dropped me to the abyss. It was like the ground had opened up under me and I was left to fall into the crone's eye, where the water was cool and yet comfortable. For a moment, I thought I would scream as my senses seemed to alter altogether. I felt my hands and feet plant solidly on the floor below me and despite feeling quite stable, something felt natural, yet strange. I opened my eyes slowly, blinking when my world seemed to look different altogether. My arms and legs trembled periodically, and my breath was heavier than I could ever remember, as I took in my surroundings. I felt entirely different, far more powerful and wild. I swallowed, opening and closing my mouth while running my tongue over my sharpened teeth in confusion. I looked from Cynthia, who had an air of being pleased, to Kate, who looked smug, as they waited for me to say something. When I went to ask if I did something wrong, a strange sound of a beastly whimper came from my chest. I stumbled backwards over unusual steps, looking down to realize I hadn't fallen to my hands and knees at all. They were the paws of an oversized wolf. I lifted one up and then placed it back down, tapping the ground as though I weren't sure it was my hand at all. Then I stumbled back further before collapsing onto my stomach to lie down, overwhelmed. I wasn't human. I was a wolf, but I wasn't a wolf. The urge to shift back wasn't even there any longer. What if I would be stuck like this? It was all too much. Calm down, Cynthia called to me, soothing. You will learn to become used to new forms. It's nothing to be afraid of. Come look. She indicated to the water behind her. I didn't want to look. I was afraid of what I'd see. What if I couldn't even recognize myself? I wasn't even Mila anymore. I lowered my head to the ground as well, still both fearful and yet something else. I was curious. But I was afraid. But I was curious. I crept forward just a bit, crawling with difficulty along the ground before pausing further. Kate groaned and then suddenly took a step towards me, dropping to the ground in her own familiar black wolf. I lifted my head at her presence, feeling an immediate connection to her in this form. What are you afraid of? Her voice suddenly echoed in my head. I froze. I can hear you. I replied loudly, unsure on how this would work at all. You can hear any wolf in this form. Stop being a child and come look at yourself, Kate demanded teasingly, moving next to me to nudge me onto my feet with her nose. I did as she requested, feeling more at ease now that I knew I could at least communicate, even if my tongue didn't speak, as I wanted to. I took hesitant steps towards the surface of the water, glancing at Cynthia. She tilted her head when I paused, and then she also abruptly breathed herself into a large wolf beside me. Even in this form, she was something otherworldly. Her fur was the brightest silver, like the blade of the weapon Roman had gifted me. She looked powerful and dangerous, much like Kate did in her onyx wolf form. And yet her eyes were soft, gentle, and soothing. "I'm here with you," Cynthia said to me sweetly, coaxing me forward. I took a deep breath, and then stepped further until I could see the surface of the crone's eye. A wolf's face reflected back to me its fur brilliant and almost translucent white. Yet, the eyes were my eyes, the jealous green eyes of the young family. They spoke to me, reminding me of where I came from and who I was. It was me. Cynthia stood to my right, looking down at the reflection as well, and Kate came to sit next to Cynthia's other side before glancing towards me. I could finally see, despite my mortal eyes, the connection. Together, we were a gradient white to silver to black, a cycle of birth, life, and death. We were Trinity. Chapter 27. The King Alpha is setting up the main army to meet here, Kate explained, raising her hand over the surface of the water to make her own map similar to the one Roman kept in his king's corner. Within the center of 3 of the human villages was a large opening where the 6 packs he had mentioned before would converge before spreading out to take out the human villages, including my own. The packs will be Trinity, of course, along with the Red Moon, Midnight, Polaris, Moonstone, and Crescent packs. What's our plan, then? I asked uncertainly. I glanced at my hand, as though not convinced I had actually transformed into a wolf not long before this discussion. Our primary plan is for you to get to the King Alpha, but we'll also need to protect the villages. He'll send waves and it will start at any time. We may be running late, as it is, Cynthia proceeded to explain with her own frown. There are more wolves joining us now, oracles from other areas and rogues beyond that. Because we will be greatly outnumbered, I'll gift them with temporary intuition. They'll be able to foresee attacks and use this to their advantage. I don't want anyone to be hurt on either side, I stated quickly, a concern growing within me. Was there really going to be a battle, not just between wolves and humans, but also between the wolves themselves? This is a war. It's inevitable, Kate answered with a shrug. We'll push forward with our group. Celine and I will be with you to protect you. If there's no resistance, no order for attack, then we'll just stroll right in to see the King Alpha. But you can see how this won't seem likely. They'll be guarding Roman. I was looking at the image of the packs on the surface of the water thoughtfully. Roman wouldn't be in any danger, being that he was immortal, but maybe not everyone knew this. They won't allow you through because of what you are. His mate, Cynthia confirmed solemnly, you've changed his mind once already. They won't want it to happen again. It'll be the Alphas and Lunas you'll have to watch for once we get through the actual packs. They have already shown an unwillingness to follow you as Queen Luna. You may have to force their hands. I was silent for a moment, thinking. 6 packs would be there. We had 15 wolves, probably more once the other oracles and rogues showed, but I knew it would be nothing to the packs waiting to attack. On the Wolf Moon, there had been hundreds of wolves there, all immersed in their hatred of humankind. Even if half of those would show within the other packs, it was possibly over 1,000 wolves along with a handful of powerful leaders. I had strained just to stop the Trinity pack from harming me. What could I do with 6 packs? We'll be with you, Kate repeated when she seemed to notice my hesitation. We may be outnumbered in bodies, but they'll be outpowered. You just focus on reaching the King Alpha, and doing what you must to stop this war in its tracks, all right? I sighed, Even now, I wasn't sure what they expected of me. Even if I reach Roman, how was I supposed to stop any of this? Would I really be able to kill him, if the time came? Time's passing. We must go, Cynthia said, reaching to place her hand on my shoulder. The wolves are gathered just outside the cave. You must address them as Queen Luna, give them direction, and then lead. My mouth opened immediately in surprise before I groaned. Why can't you just speak to them? You're the mother, I complained unhappily. Cynthia only smiled gently. I turned to glare at Kate, who had already reached for her lance easily. She paused when spotting me looking at her intently. I don't speak to mortals. It's all you, Artie, Kate waved her hand dismissively. I sighed loudly. Right, they only would use their voice around oracles. With rogues around, Kate would become her typical mysterious self and... I looked to Cynthia. I supposed I've never even seen her around other living beings besides the oracles, so who knew how she'd behave herself? The three of us stepped out of the cave to address a crowd of wolves that stood in some human and other wolf forms. They had been whispering to one another with intensity, but upon seeing Cynthia, Kate, and I step into view, they all became silent expectantly. I hesitated, but then cleared my throat. We are all gathered here today. Ridiculous, I hissed to myself. I've called you all here to ask for your help. I know. All of you have no affiliations with any pack. Many of you have been banished, or have left due to your status. I'm sure there are several other reasons. But now, I ask all of you to stand together as wolf kind, rather than a pack. Stand by request of our makers, the ones who watch over us, the Trinity. There were sudden howls and hoots of an agreeable nature. I could feel the intensity growing within the crowd as they mentally prepared themselves for the coming battle. We will have to fight our own people, I interrupted the howls firmly. We may be hurt ourselves. The Mother has granted us temporary intuition. The wolves all became deadly silent. This means two things: you will be able to foresee attacks shortly before they come and be able to avoid or counter them, and we have been blessed by the Mother. So while we may be well outmanned, I turned to glance at Kate before turning back, they are outpowered. More muted howls responded excitedly to my words. Our goal is to protect the human villages. Don't let the packs get through. As the words left my lips, a sharp and loud howl sounded through the trees deafeningly. My body thrilled with the sound, recognizing my mate immediately. I waited until the sound quieted before addressing my wolves in an even tone. Protect the humans. Leave the King Alpha to me. And with that, I stepped forward, allowing my form to mold into that of a wolf. I hesitated unfamiliarly, but then took another step before lifting my head and howling ferociously into the night. I could feel my howl reaching over the wolves, shifting before me, clawing through the trees, startling the wealth of wolves in the far distance, and finally sparking through Roman's commanding form. He immediately aimed to reach for me through our bond, and I blocked him. Only in person would I open myself to him completely. Cynthia stepped next to me, her silver fur glowing in the night like the moon itself. Kate remained in human form, turning to face the direction where the wolves were already beginning to advance towards the humans. With something of devious delight in her features, Kate lifted her lance in her hand. She spun it once in one direction, then again in another, tossed it from one hand to the other, and then tensed her body. With power I'd never witnessed before, she took a step back, pulled her arm back as well, and then launched the lance into the sky. It disappeared from sight, and as though given a signal, the wolves howled around us before lurching forward ferociously. I began to follow, but Cynthia stepped in front of me firmly. Let them have a chance to create a path for you, Cynthia said to me softly. After all the wolves disappeared into the trees, Kate pranced beside me in her own wolf form. Time to play, Kate bit at my neck teasingly before running into the trees with powerful and eager strides. Cynthia followed after her, and I almost fell over myself to run after the both of them. Running through the trees as a wolf was unlike anything I'd ever felt before. I moved far quicker than I could as a human. I felt powerful and dangerous, wild and free. Somehow, despite my speed, I could see everything within my path. I could feel the wind in my fur as I ran. I was in something of a euphoric state. It was short-lived. As we ran, the sound of ferocious growls, yelps, and howls echoed in the air. The smell of blood flooded my senses. Our path was blocked by an entire wave of wolves, all intending on passing us to destroy the humans. Just based on the amount of wolves present, I knew it was only the first wave, but even this was almost too much. Yet, our wolves were avoiding attacks with ease and making lethal moves of their own perfectly. Cynthia went forward to attack any wolves that were coming towards us. "I'll clear a path," Kate snarled from in front of me. Surprisingly, she ran forward, twisting to avoid a wolf before stepping into her human form. In 1 second, she was before us. The next, she disappeared and appeared in the far distance, as though she had teleported. As I watched where she teleported to, I saw she had a hand wrapped around her lance. With amazing strength, she gripped the lance and lifted it, spinning it around furiously. A burst of black aura exploded from the weapon, and the wolves that were intent on attacking Kate were left lifeless around her. I felt sick at the sight, but also amazed. In my amazement, I forgot I was in a battle, one in which I was in an unfamiliar form. While I watched Kate, another wolf slipped from the side and collided into me. I yelped with surprise, reaching to snap at the wolf, but they were far more trained than me. The wolf aimed for my neck and I began to reach with my power to stop them when suddenly a second, more familiar wolf bit into the neck of the one above me. The silver and black wolf ripped the unknown wolf from my form furiously, biting down until a snap echoed around the attacks and cries around us. I stood with surprise, smaller than the towering wolf, and yet he bent his head forward to the side to reveal his own neck. "Logan," I said with shock. "You finally shifted, Queen Luna," Logan answered simply before standing at attention, watching for any more attackers. "Don't look so surprised. I am your soul. I have pledged my life to you and I will follow you in battle. Even against your own King Alpha." I asked in surprise. "The King Alpha is immortal. He'll be fine," Logan stated, only continuing to surprise me further. Kate suddenly landed in front of us, with a look of frustration, in her wolf form, no doubt having thrown the lance further away to obtain later. "Path cleared. Go now," Kate said with frustration. "Holy shit, she speaks," Logan responded. Kate ignored him and immediately bolted to keep the path cleared. Cynthia ran next to me, nipping at my fur, before running forward. I didn't hesitate further. My heart pounded as I followed Kate and Cynthia through the warring wolves with Logan close behind me. Once we got past the first wave, I was sincerely concerned about there being a second wave. However, Roman must have halted any further commands to attack after hearing my own howl of battle. Did he know I was coming for him? We ran until we were nearly at the clearing where the packs would be converged. As we arrived, our path led us four onto the edge of a high cliff. I stepped forward when I saw Kate and Cynthia standing unmoving on the edge. I stepped carefully next to Cynthia with Kate on her other side. Below us were more than just 1,000 wolves. It was thousands. It took my breath away to see, and a sense of terror struck through me. All of them were in wolf form, and as we stepped into view, all of them faced us, as though preparing to attack on command. I could feel Roman's presence in the far distance, hidden from my view beyond the army of wolves. "There's too many," I said to myself. "They are no match for us," Kate answered, unbothered. I shook my head. "There's too many," I was beginning to panic. "They are no match for you," Cynthia said to me, both her and Kate obviously delusional. You know what makes a wolf not a wolf? Kate asked, a devilish tone entering her words as she looked at me. When a wolf can't shift into a wolf, Cynthia entertained Kate with an answer, looking to me as well. No way. There's too many, Logan suddenly piped in with disbelief. Who invited this pup? Kate growled at Logan threateningly, and he stepped back obediently. I understood what it was they wanted, but I was inclined to believe Logan. There were too many. However, if I were to believe I was Artemis, what limits would a moon goddess like her have? Could I ever reach such limits without having her memories? I shifted back into my human form, stepping closer to the edge of the cliff. At first, I looked at the wolves before us, but then I took a deep breath and looked at the horizon before closing my eyes. So many times I'd called out to the creatures of the world, asking them to do my bidding, but never had I attempted such a thing on so many at once. I took another breath. And then another. My heart pounded loudly in my chest at first, but then began to slow down calmly. Artemis. I was Artemis. Even if I couldn't remember it, she was me. Her power was my own power. It was sitting within me, waiting to be tapped into. I lifted my hand before me and I felt Kate and Cynthia move closer to me. A power was rising within me, the same power I used to control the wildlife around me. I didn't reach out as I usually did. Instead, I kept pulling it from me more and more, as though trying to envelope it around me. Holy goddesses, I heard Logan whisper from behind me, but I continued to focus. When I was ready, I thought only one thing and then pushed the command forward shift. The command was small, but the meaning was in depth. It commanded every wolf to shift human, and to be unable to shift back to wolf. The command reached over the thousands of wolves before me, expanding over each of them as easy as breathing. Wolves were shifting into humans fluidly, and the command didn't stop with just the thousands of wolves. The command spread over the trees, reaching all the wolves that were fighting prior. It expanded further than this, all the way to packs beyond the nearby land. I pushed the command further and further, reaching the edges of Moirai until every last werewolf in the land had been left stuck in human form. When there was no werewolf remaining to reach, I released the power, and my breath came back to me in a sharp gasp, as though I had been suffocating. I stumbled back, pulling my trembling hand to my chest. Kate caught me in her arms with a look of pure pride. I knew you could do it. Stopping wars are meager tasks for us, Kate said to me, brushing a hand over my head fondly. I blinked at her as though dazed. I made all of them shift, I said, not sure of the statement myself. You can't stop now. We have a King Alpha to deal with, Kate told me, turning her head towards where Roman had stationed hidden behind trees in the far distance. I shook my head in order to get a hold of my sanity, and then nodded firmly. Let's go, I said with determination. We all walked down the side of the cliff, climbing down into the crowd of quiet wolves stuck in human form. They all stood stunned, and as I approached, they began to step out of the way obediently. After all, they had all just watched me force thousands of wolves into human form with powers equivalent of a goddess. Kate was the first to stop following me the closer I got to approaching Roman. As the trees came closer before me, Cynthia also stepped aside for me to continue before her. Logan was the only one who seemed determined to follow me to the end, but I didn't quite want to allow him to know my secrets. I paused as the group of alphas and lunas that guarded where Roman stayed were before us and turned to Logan. Stay here, Soul, I ordered him softly, and thank you. Logan nodded reluctantly. I turned to step towards the alphas and lunas. They all stepped aside, equally as obedient. I stepped through the trees and my heart was racing violently in my chest. I was so nervous to see him, especially knowing why I was here to see him, but I pushed myself forward until the trees cleared into a small opening. Roman stood in the clearing looking down at a silver blade in his grasp. It was the same blade Greg had used on Diana. The same blade Roman had gifted to me. He watched it with an unknown expression on his features. I stood silently watching him at first. My eyes looked over this man before me. Had I truly been in love with him for centuries? I couldn't remember it, but something in my heart throbbed at the idea, as though confirming it for me. What was it about Roman that had caught a goddess' eyes? Whatever it was, it still remained to this very moment. My heart pulsed with a love irrational, a love unconditional. I wouldn't be able to kill Roman. Not today. Not now. Not ever. I clenched my jaw in determination, knowing this meant I would possibly be the one to die tonight. Is that blade for me? I finally spoke in the silence. Roman didn't respond. He only tightened his grip on the hilt of the blade and continued to observe it determinedly. I looked from his form to the blade as well. What happens when you kill your own mate? A normal wolf would die from it, Roman finally answered, his voice angry. He lifted his head to look at me as though intending to yell at me, but his words were lost on his tongue. A look of pain struck his features and he turned away. I lifted my hand to my face to feel the wet of tears on my cheek. I hadn't realized I was crying. It was very unlike me. I wiped away my tears quickly, trying to force myself to be braver. It's lucky you're not a normal wolf, then, I said softly. If Roman killed me, the wolves would be doomed, but I wasn't sure how to convince him of doing something else at this point. I wouldn't kill him. If he kills me, the curses would return and all the wolves would become extinct. Would you spare me? I asked innocently. Roman abruptly began to walk towards me and I tensed, as though he would stab me with the blade right then. Instead, he paused before me to stare at me determinedly. You've made it clear you're on the human side. In just one night you enlisted wolves to support you. Wolves fighting wolves to protect humans. He said the words as though they left a bad taste in his mouth. It was my worst scenario. If you also protect the humans, no wolves would have to fight each other, I said to him, a heat of anger slipping into my tone. There you are, Mila, Roman responded quickly, lifting his hand to touch my face. I tensed at the touch, but something about it made my heart sing, and so I held still. I have something to tell you, I struggled to speak the words. I'm Artemis. Would the words make him instantly kill me? Knowing I am a reincarnation of the moon goddess he hates so much. You shifted, I know, he guessed with a frown. Newborn shifter. Even this feels wrong sometimes. I was confused by the comment. Did he mean the age difference? A strangled laugh came from my lips. If I were truly Artemis, and I'd proven already I was, then I was an ancient being far more so than a cursed werewolf. I found out why I can control wolves and why I can shift even though I'm human. I braved to tell Roman, my heart now pounding in my throat. Give up on the fight against humans. Please. You've done it once. I won't, Roman growled lowly. For Diana. And for the countless wolves who suffered under them before Diana. I won't. How about you give up on the humans? No. I cried out desperately. My family. I couldn't give up on my family. That's a shame, Roman released his touch on my face, his eyes cold. I'm Artemis, I blurted, afraid he would impulsively hurt me before I could get the words out. Roman hesitated, but then only frowned. You're what? He asked incredulously. The mother and the crone. They came to me and they said I am Artemis. They said I fell in love with you centuries ago, and I came here to be with you to break your curse. I said the words as quickly as I could. That's why I can control wolves like I do. I just controlled all of them. And I can shift even though I was born human. It's because I'm Enough, Roman snapped with irritation. It's true, I swear it, I continued despite his command. Oh, I believe it, Roman hissed angrily. So even you were one of their tricks? No. No, it's not a trick. I didn't have my memories. I still don't have my memories, I responded quickly, my body trembling from fear as to what his reaction might be. I just want to break your curse. How? The distrust in Roman's voice was thick as he spoke to me. I bit my lip for a moment, wondering how to word my next statement. Be with me, I said, a blush suddenly rising on my skin. Roman was unresponsive, and I was afraid to look at him. I looked at the blade twisting in his hand instead and hoped I would be able to see it coming for me. You're not telling me everything, Roman suddenly stated coolly. I suppose centuries of life would make things like this easy to notice in conversations. Open up to me. I had been keeping a wall around me determinedly, not wanting to let Roman get any hint that I could finally give him his wish and kill him. I shook my head determinedly. He abruptly stepped forward and grabbed me by the back of the neck, pulling me to him with an air of complete danger. I was afraid, both for my own life and afraid he would find out and try to force me to kill him instead. I would pick me. Sanity be damned, if one of us dies, I would want it to be me. I reached to clasp my hands over his grip on my neck, lifting my chin with a whimper in his grasp. Another look of pain crossed Roman's face, but he tried hard to conceal it. There's something that would save your life and you don't want to say it. How great it must be to be a goddess. You die and you'll still be a goddess. I'm done with your games. I'll admit it, you made me love you. Congratulations, Artemis. As he spoke, Roman's words became more and more emotionless. An air of danger was rising above him. I gasped for air, closing my eyes with a wince, and then opened the wall between us. I put all my love for Roman into the bond, allowing it to tear over him. His grip tightened, but he staggered where he stood as though stunned. You can kill me if you want, I whimpered fearfully with tears falling down my cheeks, but I won't kill you. I love you. If I'm Artemis, I've loved you since the beginning. And when I die, I'll love you still. The sound of metal hitting rock echoed at our feet. Before I could try to see what the source of the sound was, Roman released his grip on my neck. Instead, he grasped at my lower back, pulling me to him, and pressed hot lips to my own. My heart sang at his kiss and my body throbbed in his grasp eagerly. Just when I was running out of air, Roman released his lips and said, "You win." Then he claimed my lips as his once again. Epilogue. The wind rushed around me as I flew through the air as an albino white hawk. From the sky, I could see the land of Moirai spanning under me with a wealth of beautiful forests. In the distance, I could see my home village. Members of the Trinity Pack were stationed there, helping with building more profitable farms and furthering new relationships between humans and werewolves. Similar things were happening at all human and pack villages across the lands. After the small battle of Moirai, rumors had spread to all the packs that the goddesses had appeared in person to fight among the wolves. Rumors of a blessed Queen Luna, who could command obedience from all the wolves in the entire land wherever she was, also made their rounds. And so, when I was announced as Queen Luna, there were next to no challenges to greet me. Roman had been pleased. One of the first things I demanded after being officially announced as Queen Luna was the reinstatement of oracles into their designated packs, along with rebuilding all temples that had been torn down. Despite prior concerns, this was actually accepted rather easily. As I flew over Alpha with the sun at my back, I saw my family working diligently towards making a better home for themselves and future humans. I was now able to freely visit them, or have them visit me, if I wished. They weren't brave enough to travel outside the village as of yet, but I knew the day would come when they would. Cynthia and Kate had left after the war had been stopped. Couldn't kill him, could you? Typical, Kate had said with her own amusement. "We'll be watching over you," Cynthia had left her parting words fondly. I missed having them around, but this was a world of mortals and they didn't feel comfortable staying here. After they promised me that Roman's curse of immortality was surely broken, they disappeared into the wind. Roman had tested the fact with a rather alarming cut on his arm, but his joy when seeing it not heal immediately was something wonderful to see. Besides Roman's curse being broken, with Hecate returning to the realm of gods, oracles would be able to receive visions from her once more. I flew towards the Trinity Pack village and saw Roman standing before the clinic, his hand raised towards me as though calling for me. I didn't hesitate. I folded my wings against myself, falling towards him determinedly. When I was close enough, I shifted back into human form, and he caught me in his arms with a small laugh. "You shouldn't do that in the middle of the village like that. Someone could see," he teased, spinning me around slowly. "I don't care," I responded stubbornly. Roman placed a sweet kiss on my powdered lip, making me forget any negative feelings I might have had. I smiled against him delightfully. "Well, I care about keeping you safe," he told me firmly before releasing me from his grasp. I bounced from one foot to the other and then looked at the clinic before becoming more serious. "I think it's time," I said, rubbing my hands together. "I think I can do it. Just try your best. If it doesn't work, we can try again later," Roman answered, crossing his arms in an equally serious manner. I took a deep breath, but then stepped forward to enter the clinic. Roman stayed with me, just as I'd asked him to do before, and silently followed me as I walked to a specific room. I opened the door carefully. There were no other wolves except for the one lying on the clinic bed, and the one sitting next to the bed. Beta Caleb looked up as we entered the room, his features that of confusion and fatigue. "Beta Caleb, I need you to leave us for just a little while. The Queen Luna would like to speak to Diana," Roman requested, much gentler than he would be typically due to the sensitivity of the situation. Beta Caleb looked like he might argue against it, but then only nodded mutely. He reached forward to touch Diana softly, who didn't respond, and left the room without glancing at me. I could understand. My brother had been the one to do this to Diana, accident or not. Once it was just Diana, Roman, and me in the room, I began to step around the bed carefully. Diana's once lively curls were flattened on the bed sheets around her head. She had woken up some time ago, but spent her time just staring in the distance silently after finding out that not only had she lost her miracle baby, she would be unable to have any children in the future. I sat down next to the bed where Beta Caleb had just been. Diana's eyes didn't look at me, as though she couldn't see me. She lied on her side facing me. I pulled my chair close to the bed so that I could reach out to grasp her hand in mine. "Diana," I called to her. She didn't respond. It was as though she was no longer there. I paused, but then reached for her with my power to call to her. "Diana, come back now. Just for a little bit." At my words, Diana stirred. She blinked her eyes, as though she were waking up, turning them to look at me with a look of sadness so sincere that it made my soul ache. "I'm sorry I'm so late. It took me a while to figure this out for you," I said to her. "What?" Diana croaked in exhaustion. "Will you pray to Artemis with me?" I coaxed her, stroking her hand slowly. "Pray?" Diana sounded slightly more awake. I nodded carefully. "I'll pray with you," I said to her. "How does it start?" "Artemis, huntress of the moon." I waited to see if Diana would continue. Life slowly grew more throughout her, as she listened to me. "Make my aim true," Diana continued for me, much to my delight. "Give me goals to seek," I said, moving closer to Diana. "And the constant determination to achieve them," Diana spoke with renewed fervor. A deep prayer was echoing in her words that she'd gain back what she'd lost. I could hear it in her prayer, as though I were a goddess listening to my own disciple. Grant me communion with nature. Allow me to live surrounded by plants and animals. I reached to place my hand on her wounded stomach, a power different from my ability to control wildlife rippling through me just as I'd practiced. I knew it would work this time. I'd been trying to perfect it before bestowing the gift to Diana. That I can grow, protect. And a look of wonder was rising on Diana's face as she watched me build the power within me, around me, and to my hand. You're her. You're her. She looked completely stunned. I only smiled secretively. I'm your Queen Luna, I said to her, the meaning laced in my words. I abruptly pushed my power into Diana, and she jolted back, gasping for air. The power started with Diana, but then exploded outside the room, touching female wolf after female wolf from the Trinity pack all the way to the ends of Moirai. The curse of infertility was officially broken, starting with Diana. I released her with my own gasp, panting heavily with exhaustion. Diana had sat up in her bed holding her stomach with wonder. For a moment, she didn't say anything, but then she turned to look at me in bewilderment. I couldn't give you back the child you lost, but I could give you the ability to have a family in the future. I hope this is enough. I wanted the curse to be ended with you, I told her, a heartfelt sincerity in my words. The words barely left my mouth before Diana leapt towards me and wrapped her arms around me almost desperately. Thank you, Mila, Diana said softly, bringing tears to my eyes. Thank you, my Queen Luna. I will be loyal to you until death, I swear it to you. I hugged her back, enjoying the warmth in her now lively and happier arms. I'll send Beta Caleb in so you can tell him the good news, I said to her, pulling away lightly. I brushed back her hair a bit, fondly. Then I released her before stepping towards the door where Roman stood. Roman and I left the clinic in silence. When we were far enough away, Roman made a noise of frustration, catching my attention. I turned to look at him in confusion. You stole another wolf from me, Roman said with a teasing tone of false irritation. Didn't you know? I asked him shortly, walking towards the outskirts of the village with him following. Roman tilted his head at my question. Know what? He inquired curiously. They call me the Queen Alpha and you the King Luna, I lied confidently. Name names and I'll correct their mistake, Roman growled dangerously, his tone implying deadly seriousness. I abruptly laughed loudly, imaging him spending who knows how much time in the future wondering if people actually called him a Luna. Catch me and maybe I will, I said simply. I shifted easily into my wolf form, running into the trees. Roman hesitated a moment too long, and I could hear him curse behind me before shifting as well. With a feeling of freedom and joy never felt before, I ran with Roman close behind. All that was left was the wind, the trees, Roman, and me. Don't miss Mila's next hunting moment. Subscribe to stay updated.